Happy 10-year anniversary to the Monsterverse, and to celebrate, we're gonna try a little drink, this Godzilla Kong Black Cherry drink, Roar Power Pop. That's what it's called here. Alright, let's see. Cheers! Godzilla Kong, the New Empire. Yeah, I know the X is silent now. So Godzilla Kong, the New Empire is the 5th movie in Legendary's Monsterverse, and the 7th installment overall so far, if you're including those TV shows, which you should, since they are part of the franchise. But of course, this is the newest and most relevant chapter chronologically, taking place sometime after the events of Godzilla vs. Kong. This is directed by the same director, Adam Wingard, and you can definitely tell. So in Godzilla Kong, the New Empire, Godzilla is up on the surface, Kong is down in Hollow Earth. Things are going as well as they usually do in this Monsterverse, when a new legend and a new evil arises in the form of the Scar King and his giant ape colony. And so Godzilla, King of the Monsters, and King Kong have to reluctantly team up to take on the Scar King. We got a battle of the kings. And here we go with our absurd movie. This movie's out of its mind. And here's a funny story. Alright, leading up to this movie, seeing the marketing and promotion for it, they always showed that clip of Godzilla and Kong running side by side doing the 100-yard dash. My dad, who is a lifelong Godzilla fan, I always see Godzilla movies with him. He loved -1. He saw it like 4 times in theaters, once in black and white even. So this new movie, compared to -1, looked really dumb to him, really bad. And most of all, he didn't like the fact that Godzilla was running now. We just saw the movie a few hours ago, and when it wrapped up and the credits started rolling, my dad turned to me and he was like, alright, call it a guilty pleasure. He had fun with this movie just like I did. I mean, is it that realistic movie that -1 was? No! Nor is it trying to be. This is a tribute, for those of you who speak Godzilla fan, to the Showa era. You know, those older Godzilla films where it was a man in a rubber suit running around doing his thing, fighting other monsters. This is that, but with today's technology, and Americanized. Or those 60s Hanna-Barbera Godzilla cartoons. Or the King Kong one. Although I will say the human characters this time around, cause you know in this franchise in particular, the human characters usually aren't that interesting. In this movie, they bring back a few of the ones from the previous movie, like Rebecca Hall, Brian Tyree Henry, and Kaylee Hoddle as Gia. And really one aspect of them that did grab me, believe it or not, was the relationship between Gia and Rebecca Hall's character, Dr. Andrews. It's evolved since the events of the last movie. I don't want to spoil how, but it has. And I was like, you know what? Alright, it's not the deepest thing ever, sure. But you know, I remember these characters from the last movie, so I do care about them at least a little bit, which is more than I ever thought I would, so there you go, credit where it's due. And Dan Stevens is new to this movie. He plays a character named Trapper. He's kind of a hothead. He was fun to watch. All in all, the human characters did not actually bore me this time around, and I gotta give this movie props for that. Yeah, neither Millie Bobby Brown nor Kyle Chandler are back in this movie, but that's okay. Besides, I feel like the Titans themselves, the monsters, the kaiju, whatever you want to call them, I feel like they had more screen time in this movie than the human characters, which feels like a first for this franchise. Seriously, lots of scenes with them. I mean, it's their movie. They steal the show, the big CGI creatures. And I'm not gonna lie, it was pretty awesome. This movie, if I can describe it in just 2 words, is eye candy. There's a lot to see, there's a lot to take in, and a lot of it is very colorful. The color scheme of Hollow Earth and the monsters. There is something very 80s about the atmosphere, with the neon and the needle drops, which I'll touch on later. I mean, that should have been a given with the font of the New Empire in the logo. Seriously, like when I saw that for the first time, I was like, is this movie going 80s? Yeah, in a way it kind of is. Even in the synthy score, well, fuck, might as well just touch on the music now. I've talked about it enough. Alright, Tom Holkenborg returned from Godzilla vs. Kong to compose the score for this movie, and he brought along Antonio D'Orio, and they do bring back that grade B Godzilla-ish theme from the last movie, that bum, 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 which I always gotta give it props for continuity. But yeah, there is noticeably more 80s synth in this score for whatever reason. I mean, there's nothing 80s about the plot or premise of this movie at all, or the setting, just in vibe of the movie, in atmosphere and tone. The colors of Hollow Earth, the way Dan Stevens' character Trapper is acting like Maverick from Top Gun or something, and the 80s needle drops. There were a few songs that dropped in this movie. I was like, I know this song, I love this song. And they just contributed to the do not give a fuck about reality vibe of the film. This movie is here just to have some good old plain fun, except there's actually nothing plain about it at all. Cause like I said, this movie, it gets so ridiculous, and it's a good thing too. It leans into its absolute absurdity. Oh my god. Like, you think you've seen some shit in the trailers leading up to this? Nah, you ain't seen shit. Folks, I'm telling you, this has to be one of the most ridiculous, out of this world movies I've seen in a long time. Oh yeah, it is up there now in levels of crazy with Fast and Furious. Like, for sure. No one's gonna argue that after seeing this movie. It's insane. Like, you don't even know. That realistic-ish tone that was built up in the Godzilla movie that came out about 10 years ago, that's nowhere near where this movie is now, where this franchise is now. It's completely gone. Granted, it was gone a couple movies ago, but this movie just, it really hits the nail on the coffin on that shit. Which means there is, without a doubt, more CG in this movie than any of the other MonsterVerse films so far, for sure. Since I will say, most of this movie does take place in Hollow Earth. We spend a good chunk of time down there, so you gotta know what you want in a Godzilla-ish movie. If you praise -1 as the end-all, be-all, alpha, and omega of awesome Godzilla movies, and you'd rather have your big Godzilla movies be more realistic, then you're gonna hate the hell out of Godzilla Kong the New Empire. But me, I knew what this was gonna be going in. I knew it was gonna be a cartoon, because that's absolutely what this is. It is huge in scope. My dad and I, we saw this in IMAX just now. There are scenes that blow out in that IMAX aspect ratio that I love. Like, at least half the movie does. And it's a good thing it does, because these action scenes, they are so big. They're huge. So if you are gonna go see this, IMAX is the way to go. See it in IMAX. Pay the extra price. It's worth it. I mean, all this big action is going down, monsters are fighting monsters, and it's absurdly entertaining. For me, it got to the point where I admit I did start to feel a little numb to it. Like, alright, I get it, monsters fighting monsters, it's awesome to see, but I think it's the fact that they're fighting in Hollow Earth, whereas in Godzilla vs. Kong, for example, they're fighting in the city. You know, they're fighting on the surface. There is that level of realism there. Granted, there are city fights in this movie too, but like I said, most of this movie does take place down in Hollow Earth, something that does not exist, to my knowledge. This movie is, for the most part, no, 100% complete fantasy. And so for that reason, I think I'll say that I still like Godzilla vs. Kong more than this movie, at least for right now. But Godzilla Kong the New Empire is a blast at the movies if you know what you're in for. And that is, like I've been saying, this big, huge, live-action, absurd, ridiculous cartoon with crazy visual effects, not all of which looks great, I'll be honest. Looks pretty good for the most part, though. Human characters that are not boring, at least not to me. That's a big plus. The music is really cool. I like the lore. Although it is kind of starting to feel like Transformers a little bit. Like, oh, now there's this new evil that is rising from the ancient past. Like, is that going to be the case with all these movies from now on? I don't know. But I personally had a blast with this one. I feel like if you see this movie in IMAX or maybe even on a regular screen and you're under the influence of anything, you're gonna die. And that includes energy drinks like Red Bull. This is a theme park ride in movie form. For Godzilla Kong the New Empire, I will say, go see this movie while it's in theaters. That's not bad. That's pretty good. And there are no mid-credit scenes or post-credit scenes, just so you know. I know, I was disappointed too. Weird. So, Godzilla Kong the New Empire. Have you seen it yet? Unlikely since it's not out till Friday. But just in case you have, what are your thoughts on it? Or if you haven't, what is your favorite monster ever put on screen? That's a good question. Whatever you think, go ahead and leave a comment. And of course, thank you for subscribing. Peace!